And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the monastery, the open bar of the internet, the world's greatest shit show, and the place where we, the good brothers and sisters of this most holy of temples, seek enlightenment through the drunkest, craziest, and most batshit ways possible. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me I have a newcomer into the temple, the leading man behind Ruttigers' Almanac, which I think it deserves some credit for resisting the urge to call it Rutgers. I'm pretty sure somebody's done that at least once.
Yeah.
Freelance artist, previously art studio lead on a lot of different projects, as well as a concept artist for Magic the Gathering, the one and only Richard Whitters. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing all right. Yeah. We had people ask how to pronounce the name. And me and my friends, we usually call it Ruttigers.
Mm-hmm.
But what I kind of replied to people was like, in world, they actually fight about that. Some people have been stabbed for pronouncing it a different way.
And I'm pretty sure some may say that fighting over pronunciation of a name might seem ridiculous. I would counter with the fact that I have had to break up fights about which state in the U.S. has better barbecue. So, precedent.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Yeah, if you've ever been in with somebody from Texas and somebody from Kansas City, you know how this goes.
Yep.
But,
Boston versus Chicago pizza.
Mm-hmm. Chicago's better, by the way, and I will.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah.
Canada gave the world pineapple pizza, and I think we're either loved or hated for it.
Oh. Yeah, but they also gave the world poutine, and I like poutine.
Yeah, it's great.
Unfortunately, they also have committed the crime of inflicting Leafs fans on the world. So, look, I love the Leafs. No matter how bad I roast them, I don't feel bad.
There's Canadians who would agree with you.
Pretty sure everybody in Alberta.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh.
The Montreal Canadiens and the Toronto Maple Leafs are big rivalry.
Yeah. I did a whole thing a long time ago on the rivalry between the Habs and the Nordiques, the one that spilled into the biggest brawl in hockey history. So that it. Some people, whenever brawls break out a lot, they're just aghast at how it could get so violent. I'm like, no, I want more of that. I want teams who absolutely hate each other.
Yeah. Well, that's an old Canadian joke.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I went to a fight and a hockey game broke out.
Mm-hmm. I've always heard it as I went to a boxing match and a hockey game broke out.
Yep. Yeah.
And I started watching the 2000s, so it was right around the time of the Red Wings and Avalanche feud that got pretty nasty multiple times. There's even a book written about it called Blood Feud.
Mm-hmm.
But I often open these things with the humble beginnings, in a sense, the origin story. So, what was your first introduction to role-playing games, and what made it stick?
I haven't mentioned this because there were a multitude of things when I was a kid. But the big thing that stands out, they were called like Lone Wolf, Choose Your Own Adventure.
Books. I'm very familiar with Lone Wolf.
Yeah, I didn't know those. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
And with the Kai Lords and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And that was probably my very first thing I ran into that was sort of a game and a choose your own adventure and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then somewhere I think around late junior high or early high school, a buddy of mine was playing I think it was Moldave Basic D&D, and we would play up in his attic. So that was really the first I played for a while with those guys.
Mhm.
And yeah, we made maps and drew our characters and did all that stuff. And then in high school, I started a big campaign with a bunch of friends of mine. And those friends are kind of the folks who are helping me with this game now, like about almost 40 years later.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah,
so it's been a long road.
what's kind of funny about bringing up Lone Wolf is a lot of that was born out of Joe Deaver's D&D campaigns. Even the character of Lone Wolf was born out of him doing this multi-class of a ranger and scion, which is endlessly amusing to me because of how cursed those classes were in early D&D. Even in
Yep.
modern D&D, they're still somewhat cursed.
Yep.
Like with the ranger has had a lot of problems over the years. I still say in the early days it was worse than it is now, even with all the
Mhm.
resets that it's had over the last 10 years. And Scion, well, when I was talking about different classes for a previous stream, I ended up ranting on some of the stupidity of the Scion class for about 50 minutes because of some of the really dumb things that were tried.
Yep.
Um, like the whole
Yeah, that
whole
was like a
separate camp.
whole subsystem.
Yeah, the whole
Y-
subsystem that nobody else can interact with. The fact that they could get disintegrate way too early.
Yep.
Um, the
I, I think that was the thing though in like movies and books and the culture back then was sort of like that was part like I don't think people had separated psychic powers into like nowadays you'd think of it as more sci-fi or something. Um, you think of like Deanna Troi from Star Trek Next Generation or something, but yeah, back then it was all kind of mulched in. Everything like sci-fi fantasy and everything there was this weird overlap mulch of all these different pop culture influences
yeah,
at the time, I think.
I'd I'd say a lot of that is a holdover from the pulp era where the line wasn't as wasn't as sufficiently drawn. There
Hmm.
there's also the fact that I look at the way say East Asia and especially Japan treats genre, and there's still that mixing, which
Yeah.
leads me to believe that this idea that there's this Great Wall of China between different types of genres isn't as clear cut as a lot of the culture seems to think.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's uh Japanese like manga and anime has some really fun world building.
Mm-hmm.
Uh and they do tend to be really multi-genre. Like if especially if you look at manga and the genres they cover, and then you look at Western comics, which is a lot of superhero.
Yeah.
Um and European comics have a bigger spread, especially since like we kind of grew up with heavy metal and stuff like that, which was a huge mix.
Yeah,
But manga is just everywhere.
yeah.
Like it's awesome. It's so much stuff.
Heavy metal is more of a parallel to 2000 AD in terms of it just being
Hmm.
this month or even Weird Tales from back in the day of just this hodgepodge of different writers, different stories, and the like. Like
Yep.
I didn't grow up with Weird Tales. Obviously, I'm not that old. I was born in '87, but
Yeah.
stuff like the Tales from the Crypt comics certainly did that, as well as 2000 AD. I know a lot of people
Hmm.
mostly know 2000 AD through Judge Dredd, but there were a bunch of other stories that were in that anthology series. Um,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
one of the other big prevalent ones was Slain, which I can best describe as Conan, but even more Irish.
Yeah. 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 Slain was wild. I remember when that came out. That was Simon Beasley
Mm-hmm.
just going crazy with the artwork. That was amazing.
Oh yeah, and Simon Beasley is one of those artists that you're never going to confuse him with anyone else. Like
No.
if you look at a piece of his, you're immediately going to go, "Yep, that's one of his."
Yeah.
But shifting into that, with there's been plenty of games over the years that started as people house ruling their way into their own game. Would it be
Hmm.
fair to say that Ruttigers' Almanac kind of falls into that tradition of just a bunch of house rules until it crossed the threshold into being its own thing?
Kind of like I, we had a really distinctive sort of purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Like for the feel of it, well, we remembered like all of us playing together back in the day, and I used to say like, excuse me, Fafford and the Grey Mouser
Mm-hmm.
and the Fritz Lieber stories. They always felt the most like the games we played because the characters were just running around, getting in trouble, like kind of being crazy and
Mm-hmm.
finding these amazing things. But even a bunch of the other pulp stuff, like even Conan or H.P. Lovecraft stuff and all that, it all kind of mixed in, but it had this certain feel to it.
Mm-hmm.
So we wanted that feeling again, like because to me fantasy has kind of changed. I think it's sort of moved a bit. It seems to be brighter colors, and some of it looks very sort of like almost Marvel Universe ish. Um, and we were kind of like, oh, we liked the gritty old stuff that was, this sort of grotty, cobblestone kind of feel.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one part. But for the rules, it's not really. The genesis of it wasn't really like we have house rules or homebrew rules that we're putting together. We actually were looking at things like the two big books we were looking at were the Rule Cyclopedia, and I really liked it because it had, character creation, all the spells, monsters, setting. It just had everything in one book. So we were like, we really like that. And then the AD&D first edition Dungeon Master's Guide, because that was just it was so full of like all these tools and mini games and this and that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and another big thing was I myself DM a lot. So I was like, I want tools to make it easier to run, but still fun. Right. So, because that's a line you can, it's like this is easy to use or easy to run, but it's also sort of too bland. So we were like, well, we want is a bunch of interesting mini games and some cool little mechanics. So yeah, it wasn't really born of homebrew. It took a lot. Like it took us a couple of years to like go through, try stuff, fail, try something else. So because we had a definitive target, we were like, we want this to feel like this and to have this for the mechanics to work that way. Yeah. So, but it is definitely sort of like, this is a game we want to make, but I do think we had like a pretty clear, because I think I even had some old house rule stuff we did back in the day. I would never use the house rules that I used back in the day. They were so, I knew nothing about how to design anything game wise, and they were terrible.
Yeah. Is
Yeah.
is this a case of the first thing you do sucks, as the saying goes?
Oh,
When
oh,
when it comes.
absolutely. Yeah, I remember in high school I made a class and I liked playing thieves.
Mm-hmm.
So I made a class and it was the Dagger Master. It was so terrible. I
Yeah.
had it somewhere. I think I've lost it now, but it was like just completely broken and just didn't make sense.
Yeah. I I had
Uh,
my own variant of thief, but it wasn't around daggers. It was around traps. Because
oh, there you go. Yep,
I had
the Trapster.
I had said because I had said to my GM at the time, and this resulted in one of my more infamous incidents that I've told a bunch of times. I don't
Yeah,
want to do the whole lock picking and backstabbing stuff. I want to be able
yeah,
to build traps like it's straight out of a Chuck Jones cartoon.
yeah,
I had said, if you've seen Tom and Jerry, you've seen Wile E. Coyote, then you know what I want to do. Um,
yeah.
and and that resulted in a particular trap called the up button. which was a rune trap where you step on it, you go straight up at about 40 miles an hour for 6 seconds, regardless of weight. You're always going at that speed at that amount of time. So imagine what happens when a dragon steps on that thing in a cave lined with adamantite.
Oh, there you go.
He tried to do the whole thing of, oh, he hits the floor and then he comes down. I'm like, no, he doesn't. It hasn't been 6 seconds. And I said, what has become infamous, the spell does not care.
Yes.
If it says you go up for 6 seconds at that speed, you are going up, and it does not matter if something is in the way.
Yes.
So
you're out of luck.
Yeah, so the dragon was not a dragon anymore. It was a lot of chunky salsa.
Yeah.
At least the village didn't have to worry about meat for about 6 months.
Yeah. Oh, and back then too, we had back in the day, what was really fun, people had different styles. It's almost like the DMs. Each DM had their own different style. Like we had a friend, Sheldon, and he tended to run adventures like by the book. And he was a really good DM and he knew all the rules. So when you played with Sheldon, it felt like you were actually like, okay, we're going to do this adventure, right? Mm-hmm. So like if you wanted to play Keep on the Borderlands or Tombs of Tamachan or whatever, you wanted Sheldon to run it because he would go right by the book, and if you survived, you survived, and if not, too bad. I was kind of on the other end where I would come up with some stuff. I sort of had like a sandboxy kind of living world kind of thing, I guess. But I would have ideas, and I would kind of have map the world and that stuff. And basically, people would come over, and we'd play and kind of explore it. And whatever happened that week would probably change a bunch of things that would happen the next week. And I kind of winged it more. And we had friends who played like complete Monty Hall campaigns. Mm-hmm. They're like we killed. There was something at that time where someone was like, I killed. I have 2 Mjolnirs, like from Thor's magic hammer. I was like, how'd you get 2 Mjolnirs? It's like, well, we killed 2 Thors.
Mm-hmm. And
it's like, okay. I think Thor's a guy, not like I don't think there's multiple.
Oh, don't tell Marvel that. They're still butt mad about the fact that their whole the name is just a title thing blew up in their face. But
that's that stuff, like having worked on Magic and D&D, that like playing with brands and basically the intellectual property or the ideas is very tricky.
Yeah. A few years ago I had Stephen Long on, and he told me about some of the frustrations he had working with the Tolkien estate for the Decipher Lord of the Rings RPG in the early 2000s, where he was able to draw from the books, but he wasn't able to draw from the appendix from Return of the King or anything from the Silmarillion, and he wasn't given a reason why. So we would find ways to sneak references in anyways. Because you know how it is. If you're not told why, and you're just told because I said so, there's that temptation to rebel against that.
Yes.
But
yep. No, that's a weird. Yeah, I've often wondered about that with Tolkien, because I think they had that with Amazon too. Like I think the new Amazon series that came out a while ago was
not good.
Was based on the Silmarillion.
Yeah,
I think.
And it was supposed to, but only in the barest of senses. Like I know some folk get on the Peter Jackson films for the changes that were done, but I'm not a purist, and I'm well aware of the fact that when you're doing an adaptation to a different medium, you can't bring everything over. That's just not feasible. So I'm okay with some small changes here and there, as long as as long as the destination is still where it needs to be. But personally, the GM style that I often go with, I can best describe as as akin to a jazz session.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's
everybody's sort of improving.
There's a loose direction, but the improving is less of people doing their own thing, but more of building on each other.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like an old bebop from the jazz era.
Yep. Yep. No, I think that's kind of how we played too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When I was DMing, I'd run a game, and then could be during the game or after the game, everyone would talk, and they would be like, "What do you think about this?" or "What should we do next?" or "What do you think's up there?" or what do you think that guy's doing? And I would just sort of take all that stuff in and not answer any questions and kind of figure out what's going to happen next week, like what's going to be surprising, or do I pay something off, or so I kind of winged it week by week. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And in some cases, you've got those instances where I'd inform someone in advance about certain plans so that they could build around it. I suppose I liken it also to a wrestling booker, where you have certain segments at certain times, but the minutia of them is a little more up in the air. Usually with a promo, it's not as scripted as some people think it is. When it's done properly, it's a case of, I need you to hit these bullet points in this amount of time, and if you do well enough, then you'll be able to do another one. If not, your name's going to be crossed off the list. Pretty simple setup there. Now, that being said, there are a few interesting things in the playtest that I did notice, and I wanted to get something of a feel for how you would set this kind of thing up, or the inspirations or whatnot. One of the early ones is what's referred to as break 20. This idea of the simple fact of adding excess attack into direct damage. And instead of having criticals be these auto successes or the like, what prompted that, or what was that drawing upon?
That came from a couple things. There was that was like a mechanic that was looking for a home for a while. But I did want a thing where you could set a target, like break, like a sort of jargon, I guess, where you could say break 20, break 15, break 10, right? Almost like DC 10 or something, but it's something I could more readily work into a set mechanic. So I was playing with that, and but there were a couple of things. Usually you have the fighter types trail behind the mages or the casters a bit. And I was like, I want to give them a little edge, and I like that excitement of you do a little bit of extra damage. But a big thing was you're good with your weapon, and it always felt like if my total attack roll was, I realized if I roll a natural 20, I did a really good hit. But if my total attack roll was 23, and it's not a natural 20, I still did a really good hit, right? Like, I'm a skilled fighter. So I wanted something to kind of bring that in. And it was always, again, very much like if you look at the pulp fantasy and the action adventure fantasy stuff, that seemed to be a big part of it, right? Like you did this big hit, and there's a little more drama there. So yeah, we put that in just to add a bit of flavor to that, and give the fighter types, whether it's light or heavy weapons or rogue fightery people, a little bit of an edge.
Yeah, and it is something that was a pet peeve of mine in certain games, where whether you beat defense by 5 points or 55 points, you are still doing the same amount of damage, which can feel kind of deflating.
Yeah.
Of course, it can also feel deflating when when everybody else is doing all these different things, and the martial character is just being a one-trick pony. I think that's why this meme of the basic fighter, or the fighter as Babby's first character, came to be.
Yeah. And it balances out a little bit of that thing. Like I said, like if you have like you roll a 19 and you put your modifiers on, and you now have a 24, so that's what you rolled to hit. You're like, oh yeah, what a great hit. And then you maybe roll damage and you get 2. So I was like, this balances it out a bit, because now you're going to get, even if you roll 2, you're going to get 4 on top of it. And you're going to be like, yeah, I landed a good hit. So it just, in the end, when we tested it, it sort of felt more like the stories, and people really liked it. So we were like, yeah, let's put that in. Let's test it out. But like I said, it was one of those things where we were like, let's try this. And then we tried it a few times, and then we were like, it seems pretty cool. Let's see if other people like it. But there are a lot of things we tried, like I said, that just kind of crashed and burned. Like, mechanics are tough. They can seem mathematically fine, and you think they're going to be fun and all that. And then when you put them at the table, sometimes players are just like, I kind of hate it. And then you go, okay, we'll get rid of it. Yeah.
But speaking of fighters and the like, I do find it interesting the way you have a class setup where you're almost picking these packages every level. In a roundabout way, it somewhat reminds me of the classes as skill packages thing that was pioneered with Sword World in '89, which I've been delving a lot into that particular project over the last few years. So that was certainly in the back of my mind with this, because each individual class is essentially a package.
Yeah, each one's almost like a stackable, like a stackable little set node or something. You might call it. So you can kind of build and get better and better at it, or you can kind of cross skills and that kind of thing.
Yeah. And with that in mind, would another reason to do this be a way to have multi-classing without the many minefield amount of pitfalls that often happens with fantasy games that do multi-classing?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, because like I said, we really started playing a lot in first edition AD&D, and they had, I think there was like multi-classing and dual classing depending on what your character was and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, it was,
and even
multi-classing
barriers to get into class. Yeah. And some of it was really, now with the systems, there were interesting parts to it. How they did it, like when you wanted to multi-class fighter and magic user, and you would kind of lose all your fighter stuff except for your hit points and start out as a first level mage, but you would very quickly rise up just because of how you got XP. It always seemed kind of convoluted. But that, again, we were going back to the sort of pulp fantasy stuff. And the biggest one we were looking at was like, we were just thinking about it. Like when you read these books, like Conan, he was a reaver and a thief and a pirate, right?
So you try and put that into one class system, and you're going to have problems. But
and they kind of lived their lives, right? Like they were like, oh, at this point they did this, and at this point the Grey Mouser dabbled in magic. So we were like, we kind of want that. We want people to have their characters be able to kind of evolve and how they want it.
I think the reason why multi-classing has been a problem for a lot of people to tackle. And this is just my observation, but it's been a few things. One of them is it was always built as a side thing, not as something more baked into the core.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is more a reflection of how advancement worked early on, because it was still built on that wargaming DNA of you're building across a campaign of multiple battles, much like a campaign in a war game.
Yep.
And as time has ventured on, we've seen more and more of this idea of building not with a set amount of sessions or campaign length, but having that be more flexible.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not saying either one is better or worse, but it's more of they're built for a particular thing in mind, and when they're put in a position where they are not able to play to that strength, you see these conflicts.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and that was one of the things we were looking at too, because obviously the playtest is sort of testing a lot of the core ideas we have to see if they work. But we were interested in all kinds of things. I think, in the very early days, it felt like let's say D&D was really a lot more about dungeon crawling and sort of like resource management, if you want to call it that. Like, do I have all my gear? And how many arrows do I have? And, do I get enough food? So there were all that kind of thing. And then it sort of went out. There was more like overland adventures that probably came in. I think one of the big ones might have been Judges Guild put out some stuff that was like overland adventure stuff. And, when it got into big cities, like City of the Invincible Overlord and things like that. So it started expanding, and to me it was almost like not really the exact same, but in video games you have all kinds of different genres. You have like MMOs and first-person shooters, and more tactical games. And it was like, okay, well the game sort of, you can almost set the setting a little bit if you want a game of a certain flavor. So there's some tools we want to put in for things like that. As well, to kind of layer on top of this stuff, because it's sort of like, maybe there's some tools to be like, I want this campaign to feel a little bit more Dark Souls and a little less Skyrim, right? So it's going to be tougher, and it's going to be a little more punishing. So it's like, okay, well, we'll do that. Yeah. It's more about resources and things like that. So yeah, and like you said, it's not really there's a right way to play. I think there's to me it was always like, I don't want to decide to eat steak every day. I like a good steak, and sometimes I'll have pizza, and sometimes I'll have ice cream. It kind of just depends on what everybody wants today. So that's what I kind of like, tools to do that.
I think it's funny that when it comes to the debate about making things more gritty or more grounded, something that I think a lot of people forget is, even if you do that, this is still a power fantasy. And a lot of people, when they say that they want to do that more grounded thing, a lot of times it feels like they are taking away options. And using the grounded thing as a means to do that. When, like, you brought up Dark Souls earlier, and I look at that game. And yes, it is certainly more I won't say grounded. It is certainly more unforgiving. It is the difficulty thing is certainly there, but at the same time, the amount of options that you have and that you can develop, you can still make a very powerful character, because at the end of the day, you are facing off against things astronomically bigger than yourself, up to Lovecraftian gods in some cases, like Bloodborne.
Yeah.
And I think that's, at the end of the day, this is fantasy gaming is still a power fantasy. But
Yeah, I think especially if you're going to use and people have said this a lot too, like the bulk typically the bulk of the rules are in things like combat and magic, which kind of goes in a lot of combat and utility and things like that. So I always saw it as the real baseline core of a lot of tabletop games, D&D especially, always felt like action adventure to me. I mean, a buddy of mine, we were talking about this the other night, but we've talked about it before. But yeah, I think that sort of action adventure and a D&D character to me is a little more akin to Indiana Jones than they are like Captain America. You know what I mean?
yeah,
But our friends back in high school who played like the Monty Hall over the top campaigns, they were playing more like, Captain America.
and I think the reason you have people playing in such wide variance in some ways is a side effect of the kind of loose approach to what style of fantasy the game is supposed to be. Because I look at say whether it be the TSR Conan or the more recent Modifius Conan, you understand what style you're dealing with if you're playing in Hyperborea. If I'm playing Legend of the Five Rings, which is one of my favorite games personally, people when I'm playing that will usually understand this is more about political intrigue. It's best not to get into a fight out in the open because you're probably going to end up dead in a few rounds because of how unforgiving its combat is. Like its unforgiveness isn't to say this is meant to be more gritty. It's more to say this is more about political intrigue, not about open combat. Don't pick a fight if you don't have to. And fantasy has a bunch of different subgenres and variants of those subgenres. It's a wide net.
Absolutely.
But
and some of them are more, yeah, they just span a whole different kind of thing. Like I said, if I think if I was running a really fun like dungeon delvey game, and you could model it more like Dark Souls, like this is going to be pretty unforgiving. You're going to be trapped in this multi-layer tomb and all this kind of stuff. You're like, that's kind of cool. But the way you set that up and maybe some of the choices you make for the rules you have for that game would be different if you're saying you're playing an Arabian Nights game. Because you're like, oh, this is probably more fantastical, and we might fly around on flying carpets, and have jinn in here and stuff like that. So it would be like, oh, those are very different feels. That doesn't feel like Dark Souls. That has like a different thing. So it's almost to me it's kind of like art. Like I do art and things like that. So it's sort of like how do I draw this? And I can draw things that look pretty scary and nasty, and I can draw things that look just sort of like fun and silly. And so to me, it's the same type of thing. Yeah. You just kind of pick what you want to do.
And something that I definitely had to point out when I was looking through this is the way you have casting work. Now, I know you had said on both the playtest and on Twitter that you want to lean more into this wild magic approach instead of a spells per day approach. I'm guessing a good chunk of that is the fact that spells are not, as I understand it, spells are not fire and forget, and the strength of the roll determines the potency of the spell rather than it having a set level.
Yeah. Yep. that's sort of, yeah, that's roughly what it is. And we had a lot of feedback. That's one I expected when I sent it out. Like, we knew things like that people will probably like to break 20. They'll probably like this other rule, or if they don't, they can use the way they usually use, so that's not a big deal. But the spell system was a big one. And it was like, we will probably get feedback on this and end up twiddling with it and messing around with it. So what we basically had, and I think I split it up a little too much. So we've actually sort of simplified it down. We're going to put out the version 2 of the playtest pretty soon. But in the current version that's there's basically you roll a d20 plus your level plus your modifier. There is a variance. Basically, the higher you roll, the more ranks you get. So if I rolled like 2 ranks, my fireball does 2d6 damage. And if I rolled 6 ranks, my fireball does 6d6 damage. So that sort of rarefies as you go up. So at low level, you can't, because of the way the chart works, you can't just suddenly put out a 10d6 fireball. You have to you still have to go through levels to get up to that many ranks. But it does give you randomness. But in that initial version, we actually had sort of like spell failure, where the spell didn't cast at all. So in the new version, we've failure is only on a 1, and it is sort of fire and forget. So like if you have 2 spells and 4 cantrips, that's what you get for the day. But we also have sort of the spell burn system, which is I want to cast another spell, and you can basically push yourself to cast an extra spell, but you'll take damage for doing it. So that can be risky.
Yeah.
So that was another one where it's like, we want it to be simple, but we want it to match sort of the stories that we read. Like, if you push yourself to use magic, you're going to hurt yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, even when I was a little kid, I was never the biggest fan of the Vancian model as it was in any form of D&D. And a large reason for that is I didn't have enough of a justification in universe for why things work that way. Like, yeah, I know Jack Vance is a thing, and I know Dying Earth is a thing, but that's an external reason. Like,
yep.
Plus, you mentioned the whole matching the fiction. I don't recall any of the mages in, or any of these sorcerers in Conan having to rest for 8 hours to recover their spells or anything like that.
Yeah. And I would say Conan, Robert E. Howard stuff, magic had that price. Especially if you were, I'm going to push this beyond my limit, then it's like, oh, you're going to pay for it. But yeah, Conan stories were the king of like the evil sorcerer, pushes it too far and, gets kind of immolated by his own magic.
Yeah, a lot of that is, I've seen theories that the reason why you had that kind of thing was Robert E. Howard having issues with what he perceived as the failings of civilization, which might sound a bit extreme, but consider that at one point the town that he grew up in struck oil, and a lot of oil barons came right in because this was still in the days where Standard Oil Company was gobbling everything up.
Yeah.
Maybe not the exact same time frame, but the ripple effect of that kind of thing, the oil baron, that was still something of a thing at that time. And
yeah,
I think, and I understand why you have the whole memorization of spells in Vance's work, because magic there is supposed to be this complex form of mathematics that is difficult to fully grasp. But look at that as a case of, whenever you're putting in magic in a setting, you don't have to explain it scientifically or anything to that extent, but it is important to establish what the limitations are and how it exactly it works, so you don't have that whole thing of it being able to do anything and everything with no cost.
Yeah, the rules of a Magic system, in a tabletop game, there's sort of, you want some rules just so your game doesn't go completely off the rails. the wish spell phenomenon. But even in the fiction or in the story, it's like does it feel right? Does that feel like how it would be?
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple of teaser things we want to put in the next playtest, because when we looked at a bunch of spells that you usually have, either in that type of stories, those types of pulp stories, or in games like D&D and stuff, there were sort of categories of stuff that were very powerful, right? And that would be like, we're going to summon a demon, or we're going to resurrect someone, or something like that. So we made kind of a different category of like those types of things, for lack of a better name right now, we call them like chaos items or Pandora items. So it could be like a scroll or an item or a place, and you can attempt to do these kind of spells, but those spells are very random, right? Like you might summon a demon, then it may or may not be under your control, and you may or may not be able to close the gate. It could be a big pit fiend, or it could be like 100 imps. So we were like, yeah, we want this really powerful magic to be way more unpredictable, and make them sort of like, this is like a grenade, but we're not sure what it's going to do when it blows up, and we're not sure, we don't 100% control when it might blow up. And that seemed to be sort of a theme in the stories as well. So there's some of that left to try out with some people in the next version, where we can try this sort of Pandora magic, if we want to call it that, which we think could be very fun.
Yeah. Something else I think might be an interesting way to spin it is some sort of reckless casting, where you can give yourself a one-off bonus to casting a spell, but the odds of the equivalent of a natural one go up the higher you push it. Like if you push it a little bit, maybe if you roll a 2 or 3, it's treated as if you rolled a 1, kind of thing.
Yeah, there's a variant like that we were looking at, because we were saying the roll for casting we have right now is a d20 plus your modifier plus your level. So we were talking about, like, what if you wanted to push that? Well, you could add a d6 to it, right? But the d6 will add to your roll, but you will also take that as damage. And if you roll a 1 on the d6, that also means the spell fails. So that would increase your spell failure, but you're also taking damage to get a bigger bonus, and you kind of suffer for it. So we were playing with a system like that, which is close to, in the first version, we have our spell burn system. So we thought that might be a fun variant, because it's sort of like exactly like you're describing, ups the chance of like a bit of failure, but allows you to push yourself, but you pay for it because you're gonna hurt yourself a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that there can be layers to that kind of pushing, because it's never a case of somebody trying one spell and then that ends up being the one that is cast, but they end up burning up in the process. It's almost always death by 1,000 cuts. The sorcerer gets more and more desperate and starts pushing more and more until they end up pushing over the line.
Yep. Yeah, and that's sort of a, if that variant one, if we throw that out in the next playtest, what it'll kind of do is sort of say, that adding a D6 was my example. It could be a D6, it could be a D4, D6, D8, D10, D12, D20. And then the risk is a little more up to you, but we're still figuring out, if we like that or if we want like a certain line on it. But generally it seems kind of interesting. So we might try to fit that into the next playtest, and then we'll see kind of how people react to it. It could also be a little bit of overkill. so we'll, like most stuff, it's like, oh, that's a cool idea. So we'll throw it out and try it. And then when people actually play it, that's the, we always cross our fingers and go like, I hope they like it.
Yeah. Incidentally, when I looked at the map that you have of Rorin the Ringed Isle, it definitely gives me a lot of vibes of some of those bubble world concepts that I've seen in a lot of pulp work, as well as, oddly enough, the way it's set up. I keep getting this visual of things like the Great Wheel in Planescape or the Nine Realms in Norse myth, and I'm wondering if that was an influence.
Oh, absolutely. I think there's a part to that. Like if you take sort of the world map, which is sort of that oblong ring kind of shape to the continent, and all those little extra parts built into it that look like something else was there that's more ancient. And then you have sort of our cosmology, which is that long kind of cylindrical thing with the parts coming off of it. I think all those things, when you look at those types of cosmologies, whether it's a world tree from Norse mythology or sigil from Planescape, it's something I kind of missed in some fantasy stuff. I really like that. That's like the old pulp, like the universe is a series of crystal spheres, or
or the world is a cube in a spatial ocean. Looking at you, RuneQuest.
Yeah, or who's the author with the the world on the back of the giant turtle?
That would be Terry Pratchett, and
Terry Pratchett,
complete insanity that is the Discworld series. Although I have said many times, Discworld has probably the best and probably most accurate interpretation of the Grim Reaper.
Yeah.
And
well, I think Terry Pratchett, like he was making fun of him. He was taking a lot of those ideas to like a comedic conclusion. But I think they're all valid in.
You can't make an effective parody unless you're already a fan.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So all those things to me were always, they made it more interesting. It wasn't as, to me, when it's fantasy, pulp fantasy stuff, things like that, I try not to dip our toes into science too much, or to have it feel like science. I would rather have it feel like the occult, right? Or some esoteric weird knowledge or something, because that's kind of what I go to fantasy for. So it's where you can go have fun like that. That's the stuff I really love.
I've tried to, for the last few years, I've tried to bully the universe into accepting Hogfather Night as part of the Christmas canon.
Yeah.
And I think one of the most since I brought up the Vancian model, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up that the character of Rincewind is Pratchett taking the piss on that model, because the whole thing is he is a wizard who can't cast magic because he has this apocalyptic spell in his head that no spell wants to share space with. And because he has that spell, everyone's trying to kill him. But there was also things like Corporal Nobby Knobs, who is described as so ugly that he has to have official documentation declaring him human. Which, on one hand would make him sound sympathetic, but the problem is he's a conniving snake.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Yeah.
maybe karma had a hand in making him that ugly or something.
Yep.
Well, I think that goes back a little bit too to what we were talking about earlier, which was sort of like realism and this and that. Like I said, everybody has their different taste to what they're going to do, and you can even try different things in different campaigns or different games. But in my personal experience, when I'm playing, it usually at some point devolves into laughter, and it's something silly, right? So it's sort of this mix. You have moments that feel like Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, and you have moments where you feel really cool like Conan, and you have other moments that feel like they're out of a Terry Pratchett book. So, and that's because the dice are really deciding what's happening.
And I think one term that I think has gotten a bit of a unfortunate reputation is comic relief. In the sense that a lot of people have associated the term comic relief with that annoying character in a particular work, when the emphasis is the word relief. And before we went live, I brought up Warhammer Fantasy and things like the Book of Grudges, because yes, Warhammer Fantasy and Warhammer 40k are both very dark, very grim kind of settings. And yet, on the other hand, it has things that are absolutely ridiculous, like a noble lord who, after getting robbed by halflings, declares war on an entire village's worth of halflings, right up until the point where he decides, I don't feel like doing this, and everybody's like, okay, we have no idea what's going on, but at least you're not trying to kill us. Or just the way orcs are portrayed in general, where they are more like northern UK football hooligans, and managing to make these unholy monstrosities of engineering work that shouldn't work but do because of sheer belief. And
it gives it personality.
Yeah. You can have the serious stuff, but on some level it should be balanced in the same in that same vein. I'm reminded of something that Mel Brooks had said when it came to dark comedy. Tragedy is when I cut my finger. Comedy is when you fall into an open sewer hole and die.
That sounds like Mel Brooks.
Yeah. And one of my favorite science fiction games is Paranoia, which most definitely is not taking itself seriously. It is one of the earliest examples of a shitpost that I've ever seen. Basically parodying things like 1984 with the friend computer who is your friend, and if you are unhappy with your clearance, unhappiness is treason is punishable by death, and now you have to roll a new character, or rather use another character in the 6-pack you have, because everybody does 6 characters because you are expected to have your characters die and die horribly. Usually in ways that wouldn't be too far removed in a Looney Tunes sketch.
And that's a great example too, because you have that where you make multiple characters just in the expectation that you'll die. Call of Cthulhu, when you especially the original Call of Cthulhu tabletop, your characters could die at the drop of a hat. Like, they didn't have 120 hit points or anything like that. So they would either die or be driven insane, usually by the end of the game. And you kind of knew that, but it was kind of cool because it built that tension, And even every once in a while, you would still get something silly in a Call of Cthulhu game, and then yeah, D&D was the one where it's like at low level, it's really tense because especially in AD&D and stuff, it's like you might have 3 hit points or something. But then as you get higher level, you're like, I have 120 hit points or something like that. So then you're almost a MCU superhero.
Yeah,
So yeah,
I've
they're all
al-
different styles of play.
I've often seen people say that playing a superhero-like character in a fantasy setting is wrong, and I've often been baffled as to why. Because all of you have you seen various cultures, mythologies, and some of the characters in them, like Cuchulainn in Irish myth, just as one example.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. With his feet turning backwards and him going into berserker rage.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, to me that's yeah. I always found that a little strange as well. That's sort of like, um, you know, you should only watch history dramas if you're popping onto Netflix. And it's like, yeah, no, I think people, whatever they're in the mood for.
Yeah.
I would say one of the bigger things where people have when they're talking about that type of stuff that I really agree with more is certain versions of the game probably make it easier to get a certain feel, or they're designed to give you a certain experience.
Yeah.
Because that to me is one of the things I like about it, and I do think, yeah, if you had players, well, we used to do the thing. We'll say, for example, you start at first level and you work your way up. Sometimes we would say, for the next campaign, let's start at third level, or let's do like a one shot and over the weekend, and we'll all be 12th level,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we would play around with those kind of settings. But definitely by default, let's say, AD&D first edition
Mm-hmm.
and fifth edition, their default sort of, I guess, output of the type of game you'll play is very different. I don't think either one is necessarily wrong or anything, but it, definitely should. If you're in the mood for pizza, you're in the mood for pizza, and if you're in the mood for chocolate cake, you're in the mood for chocolate cake. So knowing that they're different and knowing like this one is, if you want to get this vibe, this is probably the way to go. Yeah, that to me is interesting. I think they have totally different fields though, all different editions, different games. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But with that said, when do you foresee the next iteration of the playtest being ready? Do you early 2026, or is there no set date at this time?
Well, we're looking to put out the update version 2 of the playtest, hopefully Monday, like this like a week from today.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the playtest update. And I sent out some feedback, sort of survey feedback stuff, the other day to all the people who were like in on the playtest, so we can get some other feedback. We've already gotten a lot of feedback from people of like, oh, I like this, or could you tweak that, or could you add this? So a lot of that's already being worked on. But yeah, over this week, we're hoping to get like a V2 out by Monday if we can. And then long term, we would like to do a Kickstarter sort of early next year, maybe February, March, and then get the book done by the end of the year if we could, if not sooner, because we have a lot done right now, and it's a matter of like getting it laid out and making sure everything in there is kind of decent. So that's sort of a rough timeline right now, but we've sort of taken a tact too of the same with this playtest. It's like we want to play test it, see what people think, see if they have fun with it, before we would even think of a Kickstarter. Right? Like we want to make sure we have something that's kind of neat, and we've gotten a really good reaction, so that excites us. So we're like, yeah, let's keep going here.
Yeah, I can get that. You have the opportunity to do the funniest thing ever by having it be on March 4th.
What's March 4th?
No, March 4th and back to Kickstarter.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, that joke was
Maybe
terrible.
we can do that.
That joke was terrible, and I am not apologizing.
You are now part of the marketing team. We,
No,
we have,
I am never.
we
I
have
never.
kind of terrible ideas like that.
On the other hand, I've been trying to peer pressure a unwritten rule that on the last 48 hours of a Kickstarter, the final countdown must be referenced. So
Like
far, a few
like
people have gone with it. Some people haven't. I think
Yeah.
in one case, I had some fun with somebody because their Kickstarter ended at getting 666% of their funding goal. I'm like, you realize this isn't beating the internet villain allegations, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But
Powered by the satanic panic.
yeah, I've considered doing a MST3K style look at some of those chick tracks because, dear lord, those were terrible.
Yeah, those are kind of hilarious.
Hilarious in hindsight, or just going over that one person who claimed that PSR representatives contacted him to make sure the rituals were authentic. He made this claim in 1979. Yes. If you don't know anything, the claim seems realistic. If you do know anything, you're like, wait, D&D was already out for about 5 years by that point. Why are they contacting somebody about this?
Yeah.
That wasn't even the craziest one. He also claimed the Lovecraft mythos was real. I don't have to say anything more.
Yeah, that's a little. That's a little. That's a little scary.
A few of the things were like, wait, people actually thought this guy was legit. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I do want to sincerely thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come all the way to my monastery and enjoy the madness that happens here.
Thank you. It's fun.
And
I like talking about stuff.
Anytime you see fit to return, the door is always open. As I often say around here, drinking is not mandatory, but it is encouraged.
Well, I was teetotaling tonight, so hopefully I wasn't boring.
No, it's never boring around here. And of course, a sincere thanks goes out to everyone who took the time out of their schedule to come onto the show and enjoy the madness. And there'll be plenty more where that came from, as there always is here, on the open bar of the internet. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.
上楽が上長年関税を往年 something more.